Good evening and welcome to my channel. I am going to tell you story number 52 today, and this one is of course as ever based on 5 random words which are below. And this one is called, wait for it, Goldenguts and the Disciple of the Moon Goddess. Jailer Crank's bellyache had left him in a foul mood once more. The special tonic that Brother Fleet of the Monks of Eternal Vibration had prepared for him had done nothing more than keep him up all night with terrible flatulence and cause an agonizing constriction of the bowels, both of which did serve to distract him from his roiling, painful stomach, he had to admit. As he dragged another ne'er-do-well in chains down to the deepest dungeon, a level where neither heart flame nor kinlight penetrated, Crank vowed to go and give Brother Fleet a piece of his mind. Let his holiness vibrate as much as he liked. The abject prisoner that crawled along behind him, prevented from walking upright by the iron frame attached to his spine, manacled and dog-collared, was one of the disciples of the false Messiah, the goddess whose power had been growing on the eastern shores, strengthened by seditious superstitions carried to those shores by sailors and merchants. Lunal was not the daughter of the moon, as she claimed, to whom things unseen are seen. She was simply a very convincing charlatan. Women's ways, explained Crank patiently, as he took a special delight in leading the prisoner over a rough, stalagmite-littered region of the cave floor. No sound from the engines penetrated this deep, no warmth emanated from the heart flame, no glow of kinlight fell there. It was a truly miserable place, damp, silent, and foul-smelling, enough to give even Crank the shivers. Crank, who hadn't looked in a mirror pool since he was 30, lest he recoil at the hideousness of his own reflection. At least he accepted his limitations, whereas the pitiful creature, blindfolded and moaning behind him, believed himself some sort of saviour. They smile and fawn with their womanly wiles. Just when they've got you where they want you, thump! Down comes the blade, and off comes your head. Mark my words, your goddess... Ah, here we are. They had reached the first binding place. 4 feet from the base of the wall was a loop of metal as thick as Crank's thumb. No one would be sawing or gnawing through that in a hurry, he'd often thought, though desperate prisoners driven mad by the solitude had tried. Crank closed the mighty padlock over the prisoner's wrist manacles and turned the key. What a waste, he thought, looking at the young man slumped before him, arms stretched painfully up to the lock, blindfolded and mute. They don't speak, he'd been told. A vow of silence or something. You have to keep them blindfolded, because if they look at you, you'll see things that aren't there. It looked like the prisoner's blindfold had slipped slightly at one corner. Crank moved to adjust it, making sure he looked away. Unfortunately, in so doing, he caught a brief glimpse of the man's left eye in the reflections from a wet wall. It was a split second's exposure, but Crank had been taught to be cautious in his dealings with such as these. His predecessor jailer, Kloof, had walked off a high ledge and fallen 1/2 mile into the icy Threndel River because he thought he was being pursued by grim hogs and he saw a rope bridge that didn't in fact exist. The blindfold secured, Crank could go about his day. It would be a couple of hours until the prisoners were to be hosed down and given their daily feed. The disciple could sit in darkness and silence for a bit, considering his errors of judgment and the mistaken allegiances that had brought him here, to the labyrinthine dungeons behind the black courts. Crank adjusted his polished bronze helmet, whose wide brim deflected the drips from the high stalactites. It also made a pretty pinging sound as the heavy salty droplets hit the beaten metal, which he liked. Crank was about to set off back up the iron staircase when he heard a rattle at his side, and something grey-green, slimy and brisk snatched the keys from his belt and bounded off down the corridor. A golden-gut toad! The rare amphibian thrived on gold seams deep in the rock, dissolving and swallowing the precious metal, which would solidify in its gut. Drawn like magpies to bright metal of all kinds, these strange creatures were highly prized. You'd cut them open and extract the golden nugget inside. More commonly, the toads died of their own greed and excess, and nuggets could be found where their bodies putrefied away. Goldenguts were vanishingly rare, and Crank wasn't about to let this one make off with either his keys or the contents of its stomach. He took off his helmet and raced down the corridor, following the zigzagging progress of the toad. The men and creatures, variously manacled to the walls or ensconced in their cells, bayed, slobbered, and howled derisively as Crank slammed his helmet down on the ground, 3 times failing to capture the runaway toad, until on the 4th leap he got the helmet over the creature, just inches away from the cell containing the brain squid. Oh. Quicker than Crank could react, 2 of the squid's tentacles flicked out from beneath the cell door and manipulated Crank's helmet, lifting it to reveal what lay beneath. Nothing at all. No golden guts and no keys. He'd hallucinated it all, and now the squid had its helmet. Moments later, Crank slumped against the wall, feeling a sharp wetness spreading across his lower half. The squid had tossed his cymbal-shaped helmet as a weapon, spinning it into his soft underbelly, all but bisecting the jailer. Strangely, his bellyache had entirely vanished. "Oh no," was all that Crank could think to say before he died, and as the brain squid's tentacles reached out for the keys still there dangling from his belt. From the end of the corridor, the disciple began to laugh, gently at first, but with increasing vigour, until the sound echoed through the dark chambers and brought hope to everyone imprisoned there. The end. So I hope you enjoyed that peculiar little story. Strange fantasy world that I may return to, you never know. As ever, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you aren't a subscriber already. Maybe even share it. Tell people we exist, and I will keep on reading these stories because I cannot be stopped. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.